I remember that afternoon as clearly as if someone had pressed it into my memory with a hot iron. Jason was standing in the middle of my living room, still holding the drive-through coffee he had just picked up, looking at me like I was taking up space in a life he believed was far too important for someone like me. Then he said something that would make anyone stop in their tracks. "You do nothing except watch the kids. At your age, you just sit around." His voice was even and steady, like he was stating a basic truth of the universe. The sky is blue, grass grows, and apparently, I am useless. I stood there with my hand on the back of a chair, staring at him for a moment just to make sure he truly meant those words. I am not a man who angers quickly. I have lived long enough not to let a man in his 30s push me into losing my temper in my own home. But I will admit, something in me let out a dry laugh. Not from amusement, but from the kind of disbelief that hits when someone underestimates you past the point of reason. I slowly pulled out the chair and sat, keeping my voice calm with a hint of tired sarcasm. "Well, you are right about one thing. At my age, I am not running around trying to prove anything. I worked for 30 years in system maintenance. I met enough people to know that being loud does not make you right. But hearing a man the same age as my daughter tell me I am good for nothing, that part is almost funny. Funny because he has no idea that the people everyone assumes are useless are often the ones who see things clearest." Before I go on, let me ask those of you who are listening. I am speaking from Ohio, a quiet little suburb with white fences and winding streets that always seem to echo with kids playing ball. Where are you listening from? Anyone in Texas, Florida, or California? I ask because each place sees family differently, but trust me, what happened next could happen anywhere. My suburb is not special. Summer means backyard barbecues, neighbors carrying over dishes they are proud of, women swapping stories about their kids, and men crowding around the grill arguing which team will take the championship. Winter means old men like me shovel snow and complain about our backs, even though we complain the same way every year. Most mornings I brew a cup of coffee, step onto the porch, and watch the American flag next door snapping in the wind. Life is simple, a bit repetitive, but it is the kind of peace many people hope for when they grow older. I have always been quieter than most. My daughter loves to joke that if there were a world contest for least talkative dad, I would take the crown without trying. I tell her she's probably right. I am the type to listen more than I speak, observe more than I judge. When you have lived past 50, you learn that silence can be stronger than any argument. People reveal themselves quickest when they believe no one is paying attention. And that is exactly why I did not react right away to Jason's comment. To be fair, Jason is not the wall-punching type. He is the kind who thinks he can judge someone based on age or job title. He works at some tech company, always wearing a smartwatch, carrying the newest laptop, speaking in acronyms like they are a secret code. He often looks at me like he is trying to figure out how a man in his 50s can be happy mowing a lawn, fixing a lawnmower, or sitting under a red maple tree watching the sun go down. I did not dislike Jason, at least not until he stood in my house and told me that my life's only value was free childcare. To give you a clearer picture, my daughter Emily is gentle, hardworking, and always trying to keep the peace, especially since the two kids arrived. I respected her choice. And honestly, during that first year, I thought Jason was just overly confident, not malicious. But life has its way of revealing who people truly are. If you have ever raised a daughter, you know the instinct I am talking about, that fierce protective thread that never fades. No matter how grown she becomes, married, with children of her own, she is still the little girl who once sat on your shoulders laughing her heart out. So when her husband threw that line at me, something in my chest went a shade darker. Not anger, more like a quiet warning bell. Jason picked up his car keys and stepped toward the door. Before leaving, he tossed another line. "I am leaving the kids here this weekend. Do not complain. At your age, you are lucky to still do something useful." I still said nothing. I just watched him leave and turned toward the window. The sky that day was painfully blue, the kind of blue that becomes ironic when it sits next to something ugly you just witnessed. I thought the story would end with those disrespectful words on a quiet afternoon. But a few days later, while watching the kids, I stumbled across the first secret. And that was only the beginning. I still remember those early years when Emily had just married Jason. Back then, I tried to look at everything through the gentlest lens I could, the way a father does when he wants nothing more than to see his daughter find her place in the world, even if a part of him is uneasy about the man she chose. I am not someone who judges quickly, especially after living through more loss than I care to count. And I knew young men sometimes just need time to grow up. But looking back, the signs were there from the start. I just wanted to believe things would settle on their own. I remember the first Thanksgiving after their wedding. The house was full, the roasted turkey filling the air, kids running around, everyone laughing and catching up. I was cutting a slice of pumpkin pie when I heard Jason talking to someone in the living room. What about Thomas? He does not know anything about technology. Sometimes I think he does not even know how to turn on Netflix. He said it jokingly, but the kind of joke that pushes a man backward. A joke that uses age as a punchline. The words stung in my throat, but I let them slide because I did not want Emily to feel torn on the first holiday she brought her husband home. Then came the 4th of July. It was a blazing hot day, and the whole neighborhood was out in their front yards grilling ribs and burgers. Jason stood with a group of younger guys, beer in hand, talking about his new job with that tone you learn to recognize. The tone meant to separate himself from all the older men. When someone asked what I used to do, I simply said, I worked in system repair and maintenance. Jason let out a half laugh. My father-in-law used to be a maintenance guy. Pretty basic job, really. He said it in front of everyone, and I found myself staring at the grill, pretending the smoke was the only reason my eyes burned. And that first Christmas dinner he spent at my house came with a different kind of sting. Emily had stepped into the kitchen to drop off a tray of rolls while Jason sat with me in the living room. He looked at the Christmas tree I decorated myself and said, "Not bad. It looks a little old, but I guess you do not need anything new." His words always came wrapped in sugar, but underneath was a needle. The only reason I did not respond was that I could hear Emily laughing in the kitchen, happy and unaware of the cracks forming just outside the doorway. But I had cracks of my own. My wife passed when Emily was 8. The illness came so fast that neither of us had time to understand how a house full of laughter one night could turn silent the next morning. I had to learn to be both mother and father. I taught myself to cook, to braid my daughter's hair, to wash her blankets at midnight when she caught the flu. I kept everything of my wife's, even the smallest things, just so my daughter would not feel her absence too sharply. So when Emily grew up, graduated, found a stable job, and then fell in love with Jason, all I wanted was for her to find the kind of support I could not give her forever. Maybe that is why I ignored Jason's little cuts. I told myself he was young, told myself his arrogance would soften once he had kids, once life taught him the lessons it teaches everyone. But I underestimated how much damage small wounds can do. Not to me, but to Emily. Because after every holiday, every gathering, she would look at me with that mix of guilt and exhaustion. She never said it, but I could tell she knew her husband sometimes went too far. I understood that feeling well. The feeling of being pulled between the love for your parents and the love for the person you chose to build a life with. It is a thin cut, but it lingers, and I did not want Emily living in that tension any longer. It was a background thread, but it ran through everything. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, things would fix themselves. I was wrong. Quiet wounds do not disappear. They grow like roots under the soil until one day they spread through the whole garden. By the time Jason told me I was useless, I still thought he was just arrogant. But then one day, while helping little Carter pick up his toys, I heard him whisper something so soft I almost thought I imagined it. "I am scared Dad will yell at Mom." Only 6 words, but they froze me to the bone. And that was the moment the story changed direction. I started watching Carter more often after the day he whispered that he was scared of his father. Emily said she needed help because her schedule was overwhelming, and I was always willing. But this time I paid closer attention, not because I was suspicious, but because I could feel something was off around that boy. The kind of quiet unease only a father who once raised a child alone knows how to recognize in a child's eyes. That afternoon, I picked Carter up from school. He held his backpack tight against his chest, like there was something inside he did not want anyone to touch. His teacher paused when she saw me, her expression soft with worry. I asked gently, "How was today?" Carter nodded, his answer so short it made me look twice. He was usually a chatterbox, but today he was silent like the air had stopped moving. At home, I opened his backpack to take out his lunchbox. A paper slipped out. I bent to pick it up and realized it was a note from his teacher. Carter has trouble focusing. And below it, in small handwriting, a line that froze me for a moment. Carter seems anxious when talking about his father. My back went cold. Children do not lie the way adults lie. They speak through habits, silence, and little notes teachers leave when they think no one will read too deeply into them. Carter walked by and noticed the paper in my hand. He stiffened. I told him softly, "It just says you were tired, that is all. It is nothing." He nodded, but I could tell he was watching me, wondering if I had found anything else. That night, after Carter fell asleep, I went to the kitchen, made myself a weak cup of tea, opened my phone, and checked my email. I had kept that habit since my working days, but that evening, the shared family inbox made me frown. A string of confirmations from Florida, a charge from a car rental company in Atlanta, then a few payments to services I had never heard of, all under Jason's secondary card. What caught my attention was the timing. These charges happened during the hours Jason was supposed to be at the office, not weekends, not holidays, and definitely not in line with his schedule. I was about to close the phone when another alert appeared from the bank. Payment declined, limit exceeded. The transaction took place at a resort in Orlando. Jason had no planned trips, at least not any Emily knew about. I put my phone down and let out a dry chuckle. Nearly 60 and still faster with an iPhone than my 35-year-old son-in-law. Jason loved pretending he was the tech expert, yet every time his Wi-Fi failed, he called me. The thought eased me for a second, but not enough to cover the unease spreading through my chest. When I walked past Carter's room, I saw him curled up, clutching his stuffed bear. His breathing was uneven, like he was holding something inside. The sight punched something old and familiar in me. Emily used to sleep like that whenever she missed her mother. The next morning, while cleaning the living room, I noticed an Amazon box by the door. I assumed it was something Emily ordered, so I opened it. Inside was an expensive bottle of men's cologne and a gift box printed with the words, "For Jay, the shipping address was my house, not Jason's." I set the box on the table and sat down, trying to piece everything together. The strange emails, the Florida charges, the teacher's note, the fear in Carter's eyes, and now this gift delivered quietly to my address. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Jason asked the delivery service to send it here for convenience. But I had lived long enough to know that when strange things begin stacking on top of each other, something is moving beneath the surface. That evening, I gathered everything into a stack. The note from Carter's folder, the Amazon receipt, the strange emails. I was not going to tell Emily yet. I needed to understand what was happening before saying anything that might break her. While I was sorting through the papers, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the usual spot. Do not let Emily know. Everything is going well. Tonight." The sender's name displayed only one letter. J. I stared at the screen for a long moment, as if it had just reflected every suspicion I had been trying to ignore. I tapped the message details. The meeting location was not someone's house or a bar. It was a hotel 15 minutes from my home. I understood immediately what I was about to witness, and that was only the beginning of a truth much harder to swallow. I sat in the kitchen for a few minutes, just trying to keep my mind from running too far ahead. But people are built a certain way. The more you try to stay calm, the faster the pieces start snapping together on their own. The strange message. The gift was delivered to the wrong place. The mysterious travel charges. And now a meeting at a hotel. All of it was pointing towards something I had been trying not to imagine because imagining it already hurt enough for Emily. I drove to that hotel the next day, not to catch anyone in the act, but to see whether that message really had anything to do with Jason. I parked far enough away to stay unnoticed and waited. About 10 minutes later, Jason walked out. White shirt, car keys in hand, smiling at a young woman beside him. She fixed her hair while Jason leaned down to open the car door for her, wearing the kind of polite expression men use when they think they are playing the role of a gentleman. I did not see her face, only her small frame and Jason's hand resting on her shoulder before they both got in the car. I did not get angry. It felt more like seeing the rust inside a pipe you had suspected for years. It does not surprise you. It just makes you sad that you were right. I sat in my car for a moment, taking slow breaths. I did not want to drive home carrying an impulse that could make me do something foolish. That night, I opened my computer, not to track Jason, but to look into those strange bank charges. Turned out they were from online gambling platforms, the type where people pay real money for a chance to win prizes or points. The kind of thing I could spot from a mile away as something Jason did not want anyone to know about. I kept digging. He had been paying into those sites almost daily. Not huge amounts, but steady, rising. Combined with the hotel, it chilled me. Emily had no idea. If she did, she would have come to me already. 2 days later, I was watching both Carter and Nora. When I told them to finish lunch so I could take them to the park later, Nora suddenly said something that stopped me cold. Mommy cried last night. I asked how she knew. I heard her in the bathroom. Nora whispered it, staring down at her shoes like she was afraid she had said something wrong. Carter pulled her arm as if to tell her to stop talking, but Nora kept going. Daddy said Mommy is weak, like Grandpa. The words hit me like someone had swung a heavy bag straight into my chest. Not because Jason insulted me, I was used to that. What hurt was hearing that two small children had already absorbed the poison he threw around the house. I knelt beside Nora and touched her shoulder gently. Honey, you do not have to worry. Your mom cried because she is tired, not because she is weak. But that did not erase what I had just heard. Children do not invent things like that. When a child repeats an adult's words, it means they have heard them enough times. That afternoon at the park, I ran into Patricia, our neighbor down the street. She is the type who trims her roses every morning and likes to keep up with everything happening in the neighborhood. She smiled when she saw me with the kids. It has been a while since I saw Jason take them outside. He has been bringing some young woman home a lot lately. I froze. She said it casually, as if she were telling me someone bought a new lawnmower. I asked if she was sure. She nodded, saying she had seen a young woman come to Emily's house in the afternoons over the past few weeks, usually when Emily was still at work. She would ring the doorbell, but Emily never answered. Only Jason did. I stood completely still. Patricia kept talking. I do not want to meddle in anyone's family business, but seeing things without saying anything feels wrong sometimes. I thanked her and walked the kids back toward the slide, slowly, carefully. I tried to keep my face neutral so they would not sense anything. They laughed as they slid down the plastic ramp, and I watched them with a tightness deep in my chest. They were so innocent, it made me angrier at Jason 10 times over. He was not only hurting Emily, he was hurting the two small children who should never hear, see, or carry any of this. When we got home, I took all the papers I had collected over the past days and laid them out on the table. I was not a police officer, and I did not want this to become an investigation. I just needed to understand the truth so I could protect my daughter and my grandchildren the best way I could. I opened my phone, reread the message from the unknown number, then checked the inbox for more transactions. My eyes stopped at a new email from the gambling service Jason had been paying into. A thank you note for upgrading his account to a premium tier. Premium meant he had spent enough to be considered a high spender. I tightened my grip on the phone. I sat still for a long moment, listening to the faint sound of the neighbor's television through the wall. I remembered the years raising Emily alone. Remembered the nights I hid my sadness so she would not see it. Remembered sitting in the kitchen staring at the empty chair where my wife used to sit. I did not want Emily to live through that kind of ache. I did not want her childhood loss multiplied by a heavy marriage. I checked the time. Nearly 8 in the evening. Carter and Nora were asleep. I stood up, gathered the receipts, the emails, and the screenshots, and put them into a folder. I did not know yet what I would do with it, but I knew I was getting close to a truth no father ever wants to reach. I thought what I had uncovered was already more than enough. The affair, the gambling, the insults, the other woman showing up at the house. But I was wrong. That was not the worst of it. The biggest piece of proof came later that night, and it changed everything. After the night I found the evidence that left me sitting on a pile of burning coals, I knew I could not stand by anymore. It was time to do what I should have done long ago, not because my pride was hurt, but because Emily and the two kids were carrying burdens they should never have to hold. From that night on, I began working the only way I knew how, methodically and patiently, the way someone who spent his life maintaining systems knows how to handle a complicated machine. I sat at the kitchen table and spread out the stack of papers like a mechanic laying out parts. I opened my laptop and made a new folder, naming it simply Family. Not to spy on anyone, but to create a place where the truth could sit. I photographed the hidden receipts from Carter's backpack. I downloaded every odd transaction from Florida, Atlanta, and the gambling sites. I snapped screenshots of the message from the unknown number signed with the letter J. And I printed the summary of shared bank activity Emily had once given me access to. While I worked, I did not think about Jason much. What weighed on me was the image of Emily. If I stopped now, if I ignored everything the way I had in past years, it would be the same as watching my daughter sink into a pit she did not know how to climb out of. I documented each detail by date, the charge in Orlando. The gift box was delivered to my home, the upgraded gambling account email, the meeting message, and Nora's small voice repeating the things Jason planted in those little heads. I wrote everything in clear handwriting, as if one mistake could cause the truth to slip away from me. 3 days later, when the file looked complete enough to make sense, I called the one person I trusted to give me an honest answer, Alan, my friend from high school. We worked together in a repair garage when we were young. Later, he went back to school and became a family lawyer. Now retired, but sharper than most young professionals I have met. I met Alan at a small coffee shop near the highway, a place we used to visit when we were kids. I set the folder on the table in front of him. Alan looked at me longer than usual. He knew me. I was not the type to bring family problems to anyone unless they were serious. He read every page, every screenshot, every email. No interruptions, no dramatic reactions, just the old habit of a man who learned long ago to examine every detail before speaking. After nearly half an hour, he placed his hand on the papers, leaned back, and looked at me. Thomas, do you understand what all this means? I nodded silently, because even though I had pieced it together, saying it out loud felt like a door I had not prepared myself to open. Alan drew a breath and continued. If this information is accurate, your daughter is in a marriage with signs of abuse, financial abuse, severe dishonesty, and potentially emotional harm to the children. My throat tightened. I already knew parts of it, but hearing it from someone who understood the law turned suspicion into a harsh, undeniable truth. I asked him what I should do first. Alan did not hesitate. Gather more evidence. Do not confront him. Do not speak to Jason. And absolutely do not let Emily suspect anything until you are sure you can protect her. If Jason really is doing this, confronting him without enough proof will make things worse. I stayed quiet. Alan looked at me with a seriousness I rarely saw in him. I will be direct with you, Thomas. If what you are telling me is true, and if what I saw in that folder is accurate, then your daughter is in danger. You cannot stand on the sidelines anymore. His words sat in my chest like a block of iron. He was not trying to scare me. He was telling me what he knew about people and what he had learned from years of representing families torn apart by men who had been hiding their true nature for far too long. I drove home in silence. The houses along the road glowed with warm lights as dusk settled. Those windows reminded me of when Emily was young, how she used to run to the door and hug me, no matter how tired I was. She had leaned on me then, and now, with all this happening, she needed me again, even if she did not yet know it. Back home, I laid out the documents again and organized them more carefully. I made a plan, verified the dates, ordered the evidence. I forced myself to stay clear. I could not fight Jason with anger. I had to fight him with the truth, and the truth does not lie. I thought I was ready. I thought this folder was enough to show me the whole picture. But when I reviewed the last bits of data, a new file appeared on the screen. It was not an email, and it was not a receipt. It was something I never expected to find, and that final piece of evidence is what truly broke my heart. When the final file opened on the screen, it felt like someone had drained all the air out of the kitchen. It was a statement from a savings account I never knew Emily had. Every withdrawal matched Jason's gambling deposits. Not hundreds of dollars, thousands. Pulled from their shared savings. From the money Emily had put aside for the future of the two kids. Every line, every number felt like a punch straight to my chest. What I had suspected was no longer scattered pieces. It had become a complete and brutal picture. I shut the laptop and leaned back in the chair. The kitchen felt dimmer even though the lights were on. I do not know how long I sat there. Long enough that when I finally stood, my knees ached and my heart beat heavy like an old engine, overdue for maintenance. I walked into the backyard, then into the garage, looking for space to breathe. The garage was where I kept the things that belonged to my past. The tools, the old metal parts, and the radio my wife used every morning to listen to the weather. I fixed that radio more times than I could count, not because it needed it, but because fixing it made it feel like she was still close. I turned on the garage light. The warm glow spread across the scratched wooden table and washed over my hands. I took the radio, set it on the workbench, opened the toolbox, and began unscrewing it part by part. I did not need to repair it. It worked fine. But my hands needed something to do, so my mind would not fall apart. When I loosened the third screw, my hand trembled slightly. Not from age, but from anger that had been building for years. I had never imagined I could get this angry. Angry at Jason for what he had done. Angry at myself for ignoring the signs. Angry that I once believed silence was the best way to keep the peace. In the sound of metal clicking softly, I heard Emily's voice from when she was little. Daddy, when I grow up, I want to marry someone like you. Someone kind. Someone who listens. That sentence used to make me feel like I had done something right in my life. But now it made my chest ache. She did not deserve to live with a man who treated kindness as weakness. She did not deserve to cry in the bathroom every night. She did not deserve to fear what her children might overhear. I put the screwdriver down and braced both hands against the table. My whole body bent forward, pulled down by exhaustion and something heavier than time. What was I supposed to do? If I spoke now, would it blow everything apart? If I stayed quiet, would I be letting her drown? I had known the real answer for years, but as a father, you always think that saying a painful truth means you are the one destroying your child's home. I sat on the old wooden chair in the garage. Wind slipped through the cracks in the door, carrying the smell of dry leaves. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw Emily in her shred shoes running across the yard. I saw her asleep on my shoulder after a long shift. I saw all the nights I juggled everything alone just so she could have a childhood without missing pieces. I realized that if I stayed silent now, I would be the one betraying my role as her father. I opened my eyes and drew a long breath. I had seen too much to pretend otherwise. The bank withdrawals, the hotel message, the woman at the resort, the gambling, and Nora's small voice telling me her mother cried. I could not let Emily live in darkness, believing it was light. I stood up, put the radio back on the shelf, closed the toolbox, and turned off the garage power. The decision I had made felt like lifting something sharp and necessary with bare hands. I whispered to myself, just barely a breath. Silence is a sin. I cannot let Emily live one more day in a lie. Inside the house, I placed the organized folder on the living room table. Tomorrow, I will ask Jason and Emily to sit down with me. I would not speak until they were both there, and I would let the truth speak for itself. No yelling, no insults, no emotional blows. I would use the evidence and the steadiness I had spent a lifetime learning. I looked at the folder one last time, then turned off the living room lights. I thought that preparation would make me calm enough to face Jason. I thought I was ready for the most important conversation of my life, but I had no idea Jason would react in a way I never could have predicted. And that is how the confrontation began. I prepared for the confrontation the way a man prepares for a battle he never wanted, but can no longer avoid. That familiar living room felt foreign that morning. I placed the folder on the table. It was no longer paper. It was true. Truth I had avoided for far too long. Emily came back after dropping the kids off and sat beside me. Her eyes asked more questions than her voice ever could, but I told her Jason would be home any minute. When he walked through the door, I caught a flicker of panic in his eyes. Maybe his instinct was warning him that today was not like any other day. We need to talk, I said, not the kind of talk you have after dinner. This is a family matter. Jason looked around the room before forcing himself into a chair. Emily leaned slightly toward me, like she was bracing for impact. I set the bank statement on the table, turning it toward both of them. Emily only needed 3 lines to understand. She looked at Jason, waiting for a reason that made sense. He tried smiling, a twisted attempt. Just work expenses. Nothing serious. I said nothing. I placed the screenshot of the message on the table. The meeting, the sweetness. The messages were meant for someone else. Jason's face tightened, his voice rising. Someone is setting me up. You believe this, Thomas? Emily's hands clenched. I heard the dryness in her throat. I spoke slowly, each word like setting down a stone. No one is setting you up, Jason. This is your own message history, and this, I pointed to the statement, is the money you sent her. Jason turned to Emily. I did not cheat. I just helped someone who needed it. Emily let out a thin, painful laugh. Then what about the entertainment charges? And the gambling? Who were you helping there? Jason was losing his balance, but he had not exploded yet. I wanted him to see one more thing. I handed Emily the teacher's note from Carter. The worry, the hesitation, the fear tied to the word father. Emily covered her mouth, eyes watering. Jason shot up from his seat. Kids imagine things. Everything gets exaggerated. There is nothing wrong. I knew this was the moment I had to stay calmer than him. My voice stayed low. Emily, you need to hear this recording too. I pressed play. Carter's voice came through, soft as dried leaves. Daddy said Mommy cries because she is weak. Weak like Grandpa. Emily sucked in a breath like someone had hit her right in the chest. Jason jumped in. He misunderstood. You know how kids talk. They make things up. That was not what made her cry. It was the sound of Jason's voice in that recording. That cold contempt. The same contempt I had heard in this house before. Jason lunged verbally at me. You are destroying my family. I looked straight at him. I am not the one destroying anything, Jason. You are. I slid the last picture across the table. The hotel lot, Jason, and the woman. The image said everything. Emily stopped crying. The tears dried on her cheeks. She stared at the photo for a long time, like she was staring at a truth she had suspected but never dared to face. Jason panicked. No excuses left. He glanced at me, then at Emily, then back at me again, searching for an exit in a room with none. I was only helping her, Emily. I swear, you have to believe me. Emily spoke with a voice I had never heard from her before. It was not the voice of my daughter. It was the voice of a woman drained dry of trust. I did believe you, until today. The air in the room thickened. Jason breathed hard, looking for a foothold. I knew this was when the legal advisor I had asked to be present needed to step in. She had been standing by the doorway from the start to ensure things stayed safe. Jason spun toward her. Who are you? She answered calmly. I am here to assess the legality of the evidence. And based on everything Mr. Thomas has provided, I can confirm he has followed proper procedure and acted fully within his rights to protect his family. Jason opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She continued. Jason, you should understand that defamation, emotional manipulation, and marital financial misconduct are serious legal matters. Emily stared at her own hands. They were shaking. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. When she looked up at me, I no longer saw simple hurt. I saw awakening. The kids and I will stay with Dad tonight. Her voice was so steady it startled even me. Jason stumbled back. You cannot do that. This is our home. But he knew. Everything had collapsed. He reached toward her, but she moved away instantly. No hesitation, no mercy. Emily said, you have lied to me long enough. I thought that was the end. I thought the confrontation had crushed Jason completely. The folder on the table felt like the final wall closing him in, but I gave him too much credit. Because right then, when we believed truth had won, Jason locked his eyes on me. And something shifted. Not panic, not anger, calculation. He opened his mouth and I knew instantly that I was about to hear the dirtiest move he had left. A move none of us in that room were prepared for. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. Jason had never played fair. he had never intended to lose. And he was about to do something that made both Emily and me go cold. Jason stood in the living room that day, eyes sharp with calculation. He spoke like a man who had just found the last piece of driftwood to cling to. You know what, Emily? Your father is the one trying to tear us apart. He is jealous because I am the man of this house. I heard people say your father had psychological evaluations before. I did not want to mention it, but he is not stable. Hearing that twisted something deep inside me. Not because he slandered me, but because he dared invent a story to save himself while his wife and children were breaking right in front of him. Before I could speak, the legal advisor rose from her seat. Jason, what you just said is defamation. We have complete legal documentation proving Mr. Thomas is fully healthy and mentally stable. If you continue, we can file a report immediately. Jason froze out of moves. Emily stared at him, her eyes no longer angry but disappointed, a disappointment so deep it chilled the entire room. She said firmly, "We need to separate. I am filing for legal separation." Jason staggered like someone had pushed him backward. He tried to speak, but the evidence lay on the table in front of him, each page a brick sealing every exit he had left. He turned away, trying to gather what remained of his pride, but his shoulders shook like a man standing in a harsh wind. The next day, Emily filed the papers at the courthouse. The legal advisor went with her. I waited in the hallway, not interfering, just resting a hand on her shoulder when she stepped out. She looked exhausted, but her eyes held a clarity that only comes when a person rises from a place they once thought would swallow them whole. I had never wanted my daughter to walk through something like this, but I knew it was the only path back to peace. The court reviewed the file for nearly 3 weeks. They read every line of evidence I had collected. No one said anything directly, but their expressions told me everything. It was undeniable. Emily received temporary custody, and Jason was ordered to attend mandatory counseling. He would not be allowed to see the children without supervision at first. I stood in the courthouse hallway as the ruling echoed down the corridor. Leaning against the cold wall, feeling a weight I had carried for years finally slip off my shoulders. It was not a victory. It was simply the ability to breathe without folding in fear. After them, Emily and the kids moved in with me temporarily. My quiet house filled with the sound of little feet running down the hall, Nora's soft giggles, and the refrigerator door opening far more times than I could count. And despite the chaos, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. The first night they stayed, Carter would not sleep. He paced outside my bedroom door until I brought him in to lie beside me. He turned toward me, his eyes wide in the dark. "Is Dad coming here, Grandpa?" I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. You are here with your mom and with me. No one is going to scare you." He curled up against me and whispered, "I am safe now, right?" My throat closed up. I wrapped an arm around him, patting his back the same way I did with Emily when she was little. "Yes, you are safe. Grandpa is here." I did not sleep that night. I just listened to his breathing, steady and small, and felt one part of my heart settle while another part ached with a heaviness I cannot name. Being a father is never easy, but being a grandfather is its own quiet burden, especially when you see the wounds your child and grandchildren carry because of someone who should have protected them. The weeks after were spent rebuilding. I took the kids to school, brought them home, helped Carter with homework, and coaxed Nora into her naps. Emily and I handled finances, divided responsibilities, and sorted through what she needed to pick up from the old house. More than once I saw her stand still in the master bedroom doorway, her eyes caught somewhere between pain and relief. I did not ask. A father should know when silence is the only kindness. Jason did not show his face often. Either he was hiding from the consequences or trying to find a way to blame everyone except himself. Either way, the court had stepped in, and he could not hurt Emily or the children easily anymore. One evening, while I was repairing an old chair in the garage, Emily walked in. She said, "Thank you." The words did not comfort me. They made my chest sink. Because when a daughter has to thank her father for protecting her, it means she has been hurting for far longer than she ever admitted. I looked at her for a long moment. "You do not thank me. A father is born to shield his child." That is all. Her eyes grew red, but this time from relief, not pain. I thought the hard part was behind us. I thought now that Emily and the kids were safe, we could finally start patching the cracks. But the best part had not happened yet. It came on a Sunday morning. And even now, when I think about it, something warm rises in my chest in a way I cannot fully explain. That Sunday morning, I woke up early like I always do. Habit has a way of pulling a man out of bed no matter how peaceful the house feels. And mine now had the sound of laughter, small footsteps, and the steady little voices calling Grandpa every morning. I brewed a pot of coffee, pulled the curtains aside, and let the first light spill into the room. The air felt so calm, I just stood there for a few seconds, breathing it in. I heard laughter in the kitchen. Carter had his toys spread across the table while Nora was stretching her arms toward a cereal box she could not reach. Emily stood by the stove, her hair tied back, looking lighter than she had in weeks. She turned to me with a soft smile. "Did you sleep well, Dad?" I nodded. For the first time in a long while, I truly did. That answer made her smile linger. The kind of smile that tells you the pain is slowly stitching itself back together. Carter climbed onto a chair and shouted, "Grandpa, today you have to teach us how to make burgers." I laughed. The kids, ever since they moved in, were more confident, more talkative, and suddenly full of questions that kept me smiling the whole day. I told them, "Sure, but your old grandpa gets a little heavy-handed with the salt." Carter scrunched up his face. "Last time was so salty, I thought I was eating the ocean." Emily burst out laughing. Nora giggled too, even though she had no idea why. I just stood there watching the three of them, feeling something warm spread through my chest like someone had lit a small furnace inside me. I thought back to months earlier when Jason told me I was good for nothing but babysitting. I swallowed that insult then, but now, looking back at everything we had walked through, I understood something. Being underestimated never made me smaller. Staying calm, standing up, and protecting my family. That is what made me the real backbone of this home. No shouting, no fighting, just the truth. After breakfast, we carried our chairs to the backyard. The weather was perfect, warm sun and a light breeze. Carter rode his bike around the yard, Nora chased her dolls, and Emily sat on a folding chair holding a warm cup of tea. I looked at her and knew that even though life had bent her in the past months, she had found the strength to stand again. She no longer walked with that hesitant air she carried when she first left the old house. She had a steady footing now, a plan for her future, legal guidance, and she had me. She was stronger than she thought. By noon, the kids and I were making burgers. I taught them how to shape the patties and to press a little dent in the middle so they would not puff up too much on the grill. Carter squinted at me and said, "Go easy on the salt this time. I do not want another extra flavorful burger." I laughed. I know. Nora chimed in, "You added too much." 3 times we all laughed, and somehow that was warmer than any heater I had ever owned. Watching the kids run around, I remembered the first day they came to live with me. Carter was stiff as a board, his eyes always flicking to the door like he expected a car to pull up. Nora cried whenever the room got too dark, but now they moved around the backyard like it was the safest place on earth. I was not triumphant. I did not feel joy over Jason's downfall. Any joy I felt came from one simple thing. Emily and the children had their normal life back. Their laughter, their ease. I held on to one thought. Sometimes justice does not need to roar. It only needs time and truth. And when time and truth stand beside you, everything else eventually falls into place. In the afternoon, Emily sat beside me, watching the kids play. She spoke softly. "I am still not used to sleeping without fear." I turned to her and said, "You did the right thing." And the right thing always takes time before peace comes back. She leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. This time it was not heavy. It was the breath of someone who had walked through a storm and finally stepped onto dry ground. I smiled and looked up at the sky. I have seen storms come and go in my life, each leaving its own mark. And this time, watching everything settle again, I understood something clearly. I was not just the grandpa who watched the kids. I was the one who kept our family from breaking apart any further. As the sun began to set, Carter ran over and wrapped his arms around me. "Grandpa, tomorrow we'll make more burgers, okay? But less salt." I ruffled his hair, while Emily laughed behind us. And for the first time in a long while, I thought maybe life still held good things I had forgotten to expect. Sitting there in the backyard, I found myself thinking about the people listening to or watching this story. People who have felt betrayal, disrespect, or who had to stand up alone to protect someone they love. I know many of you understand that feeling. So I said something gently, something I meant from my heart. If this story reminds you of something in your own life, subscribe to the channel. I have more real American stories to share, and maybe one of them will help you or someone you care about. But inside, I was thinking something simpler. This story is not just for telling. It reminds me that family, no matter how damaged, can still be held together by the kindness and steadiness of one person brave enough to stand up. And if I can do it at my age, anyone can.